One of the more serious issues we have found was associated with a care facility, a seniors home, where 21 mail-in ballots were cast. Mail-in ballots where the voting station was just 80 meters across the road from where this facility was located. And individuals in that facility have come forward with affidavits with regards to voting, regards to what happened associated with that.
Well, if you had reservations over the integrity of British Columbia's 43rd general election before, wait till you hear what I'm about to share with you from what I learned today at a press conference within the legislature. I'm Drea Humphrey with Rebel News, bringing you the other side of the story.
Some of those changes included tabulators. There are stories of ballots being taken home. There's lots of concerns over phone voting and things like that. I haven't heard you mention any of those things. Are those going to be issues you are also calling into question as well?
Those are all things that my hope is, as part of the independent review, will come forward. And I'm assuming, and maybe I shouldn't assume, but I would request that an independent review has an opportunity for the public to be able to come forward with their concerns and issues, and to be able to do the follow-up and to look into it.
Now, if you've been following any of my reports at bcelectionintegrity.com, then you know that British Columbia just had an extremely tight race, and that the tightest riding in all of those races was that of Surrey-Guildford. That's where Hamveer Singh Randhawa had a tug-of-war of a race between the NDP's Gary Begg, who's now been crowned the Minister of Public Safety. At first, Singh thought he won the race, as you can see here, where he celebrates with family, friends, and supporters. But then shortly after that, he was told after mail-in ballots and absentees that he no longer was the winner. Instead, Begg was, by a mere 27 votes. And because that was within the 100 range, it meant that the count went to judicial review. And a justice determined that there were 5 vote discrepancies in that recount, and that Begg was still the winner by a mere 22 votes. Or was he? Inside of the legislature today, the Conservative Party of BC leader John Rustad, alongside with Singh, made some shocking announcements about irregularities they say they have discovered connected to that specific riding and more. John Rustad is calling for there to be a review into the election that is truly independent and a review into Elections BC. But Mr. Singh, who's also a lawyer, is actually bringing forth legal action. He wants to have the outcome of his riding declared invalid and that a by-election be prompted. Some of the examples of why you can hear from Mr. Rustad here.
We've heard many stories about, for example, non-Canadian citizens who have voted in this election. However, that's something that we can't prove, because obviously no one's going to be coming forward and putting up their hand saying, please have me eligible for a fine and put me in jail. So these are the types of things that are hard to follow up on in terms of it, which is one of the reasons why we'll have a recommendation associated with that as well. We found other cases where an individual went to vote and was told they couldn't vote because somebody had already voted. Somebody had already registered a vote in their name. Errors can be made. We understand those sort of things. Found another incident, for example, where an individual was registered as voting who said they didn't vote. Okay, once again, you don't know for sure how those things play out, but those are the kinds of things that we hear.
But that's not the thick of it. Oh no. One of the things that Hamveer and his team discovered as they started to investigate their very close race was that a care home by the name of Argyll Lodge that takes care of people who are mentally ill had 21 votes come in by mail, even though they are located directly across the street from a voting place. Now, those mail-in votes, you could say, well, maybe the people were physically disabled, but again, it was a mental thing. Some of his team actually went and spoke to some of the people, and that's when they found even more shocking. And at the time, they said there was 21 to 22 people living there, which implies that probably everybody voted, right? But the team has actually gotten some sworn affidavits from some of the people, including a couple who say they never voted at all. Some of the information is written in these notes I have here, and I'll read some of it for you.
One of the more serious issues we have found was associated with a care facility, a seniors home, where 21 mail-in ballots were cast. Mail-in ballots where the voting station was just 80 meters across the road from where this facility was located. And individuals in that facility have come forward with affidavits with regards to voting, regards to what happened associated with that. There's concern that these votes, that a third party has come in and been partaken and part of how these votes were cast and done. It is a serious concern that needs to be looked into with regards to an investigation.
It says that somebody was helping him out was shocked to learn that two of the people living there had no clue there was an election. And as confirmed by both, with the names redacted, residents of the lodge are not restricted in their ability to leave or re-enter the facility, but voted using mail-in ballots anyways. Neither of the names asked any staff member at the lodge to order mail-in ballots on their behalf, nor did they personally order the mail-in ballots. It says that they were instructed by a staff member, name redacted, at the lodge to mark a cross in a box on the mail-in ballots as per staff's preference, and that they believe the most of the other residents as well at the lodge have also not requested mail-in ballots, and that some of them were not even mentally capable to decide on who they vote for. So again, in a riding where it was just a mere 22 votes, that is quite the concern. So we're going to be following this petition that's being brought forward by Singh very closely. But again, I mentioned that Rustad is also echoing concerns. I had a couple of questions for him, in particular, after he pointed out that Mr. Eby was very involved with some of the changes that took place, such as tabulators and phone voting.
You mentioned that Premier David Eby was an author to a lot of the sweeping changes that took place this time around. But at what point do you think that BC elections should be responsible for some of the irregularities and discrepancies that are being found, including we know about the 861 ballot that wasn't counted, and also other discrepancies over 60 ridings? When do you start to put them in question?
It's one of the reasons why when I call for an independent review, it's not just a review of the election and what it went on during this election, but a review, an independent review of Elections BC itself, of the way it conducted the election, to be able to make sure that if there are problems and issues, and I've heard many stories, and these are things that are just stories, so I'm reluctant to come forward with and talk about them without actually having the evidence on it. But many stories in terms of some of the way that Elections BC had conducted this election. So I think it's important that there is an independent review, not just of the election, but of Elections BC and of the Elections Act, to look at strengthening the electoral process in British Columbia.
Here's an example of one of the affidavits themselves. It says, I was approached by, name redacted, who asked me questions about my voting in recent provincial elections. I was shocked to learn that the voting location was right in front of our lodge. I was not aware that the provincial election was occurring. I did not look into any parties or their policies. I did not know which candidates were running in the elections. I did not ask the manager or the staff member at the lodge to order me mail-in ballots, and I was rushed into marking the ballot. I don't even know who I voted for. So again, in a riding where Mr. Begg wins by 22 votes and 21 votes come from a home that perhaps people were not even cognitively able to participate in or unaware who they're voting for, it's quite the concern. Now, Mr. Rustad is, like I said, calling for a review, and Singh is going ahead and bringing forth a petition to challenge this for more reasons, which I'll put in the written article below. But I did have a couple of questions for Rusted. He did point out that, Premier Evie did sign off on some of the changes that people have some concerns over. But there wasn't a whole lot of talk about Elections BC, even though, as I've reported before, they did drop the ball in quite a few ways over this election.
Some of those changes included tabulators. There are stories of ballots being taken home. There's lots of concerns over phone voting and things like that. I haven't heard you mention any of those things. Are those going to be issues you're also calling into question as well?
Those are all things that my hope is, as part of the independent review, will come forward. And I'm assuming, and maybe I shouldn't assume, but I would request that an independent review has an opportunity for the public to be able to come forward with their concerns and issues, and to be able to do the follow-up and to look into it. That's the key of having an independent review that looks at these things, which is why the review should not just be done internally by Elections BC or through an all-party committee or any of that type of process. That's why this needs to be independent, put out there, so that people can have full confidence in terms of what a review could potentially reveal.
Now, at Rebel News, we tell you the other side of the story. And unfortunately, even with something as straightforward as the fact that it's possible that mentally ill people were exploited to vote for, well, we don't know, the mainstream media is still missing the plot, I'd say rather intentionally. But what did you get from this press conference? Was your spidey senses already up about this election? Do you think we're going to find more irregularities and more discrepancies as we go? Do you think something nefarious happened? Or do you think it's just a whole bunch of incompetence or social justice warriors exerting their power over others? I'm Drea Humphrey with Rebel News. I hope you appreciate that I hopped on a ferry and drove here, and that we are independent media, so those costs are a lot. But we had to be here to tell you the other side of the story that the mainstream media may ignore. If you appreciate my coverage on the BC election, which I will continue to do and continue to expose any cracks in its surface, please consider going to our special website called bcelectionintegrity.com and donating what you can there to help us recoup some of the many costs involved. And take action as well. You can join others in demanding that there is a review, an independent one, into this election. And you can do so easily by firing off emails in just a couple of clicks. I'll see you next time.